All right, hello everybody. This is the additional information, slides, content from the reproductive system that we didn't get to in class on Thursday. The first slide that we didn't get to, I actually skipped 2 slides to get to the female reproductive cycle, is this one. If you wanted to make and sell a male contraceptive, which of these should you block? This is following the slide where we had looked at what happened if the aliens injected you with luteinizing hormone, and then we've been talking about this cycle here. So in terms of a male contraceptive, all of these would actually work. GnRH would work because it blocks FSH and LH. FSH would work because FSH is required for spermatogenesis. And LH would work because LH is the trigger for testosterone production, and testosterone is required for spermatogenesis. However, only one of these would be acceptable by the marketplace, and I leave it to you to figure out which that is. But side effects are a big deal, and those would be far more prevalent with 2 of these than with the other choice. This is simply a review question to get you guys to remember that you're supposed to know that steroid hormones work differently than protein hormones. Only one of these is a steroid hormone, and steroid hormones, as I hope you remember, and some of you probably remember, work primarily through changing rates of transcription in their target cells, and changing the rate of transcription is something that takes usually at least several hours before it has any effect in the target cell, since any change in transcription rate only becomes apparent when that transcript is translated and the protein is formed, the mature protein is formed. All right, so estrogen is the correct answer to this question. Okay, so then we did the female reproductive system, and that's good because this is, I think, the figure in the book that requires the most time spent together in class discussing it. And if you didn't feel like you had enough time to process this, again, I'd say have a cup of tea with it and then come see me and we'll talk about it more. We talked about that one. We didn't actually do this question, but I had said in class that the way the abortion pill works was by preventing progesterone from binding to its receptor, which causes menstruation. I mean, that's what happens if you go back here at the end of the luteal phase here. The progesterone level drops, and that's what causes menstruation there. So you have to maintain progesterone to do that. Okay, so that was that one. And we've essentially also already talked through this one, at least in the male. Or maybe it's the reverse case. But anyway, if you took a drug that blocked FSH, there's 2 reasons why you wouldn't get ovulation. One is there'd be nothing to ovulate. There would be no eggs that had been developing for that to happen. And the second reason is that ovulation is triggered by the LH surge, which is triggered by estrogen becoming positive feedback, at the estrogen GnRH connection becoming a positive feedback instead of negative feedback. And the thing that causes that is the follicles making all this estrogen. But if you have no FSH, you don't have any follicles, so you don't have any estrogen. So the answer to this question is no, and if my explanation didn't make sense, come see me and we'll talk about it more. Okay, so this is just a way of reminding you that eggs and sperm are very different in the way that they, how long that they live. Eggs can live for 12 to 24 hours, and then they die. Sperm can live for, it depends on the source. Most books say 3 to 4 days. Your book says 5 or 6 days. Probably the extreme sperm can last 5 or 6 days. Most of them are probably dead in 3 or 4 days. But either way, intercourse before ovulation is much more effective than intercourse after ovulation, because if you have intercourse before ovulation, the sperm can wait. So the ranking is actually the order given on the slide. 2 days before. Well, I guess day of is also 2 days before and day of are both quite likely, or quite effective. Day of is probably perfect to maximize the number of sperm. So maybe I'd say BAC, because some sperm will die even in a short period. And the vast majority don't make it to the egg anyway. How does sperm find eggs? I don't think you actually have to know this. I just, like to talk about that kind of thing. The correct answer is B. A also probably occurs at least in some species. It's a little unclear whether it happens in humans or not. C, I completely made up. D is probably the case if their chemoreceptors aren't working, but they should be able to use that. But again, it's just a bonus factoid. You don't really need to know that, so I wasn't worried about not getting to it. There's a series of things that happen when the sperm locates the egg that you have to know just a tiny bit about. But basically, as the sperm reaches the zona pellucida, which is this protein layer around the egg, it has to sort of explode this set of enzymes in its head, open the capsule of enzymes, and allow those protein digesting enzymes to digest through that. It's the light blue layer here, the zona pellucida. And then the sperm can bind to sperm receptors on the egg cell membrane. And only one sperm can do that, which is what's shown here. So there's this thing called the cortical reaction, where the sperm binds, the first sperm binds, and that causes the egg to remove any other sperm receptors that are on its cell membrane, and that prevents more than one sperm from getting in the egg, which would be a disaster, because if you had 3 sets of genetic material or more, the embryo can't be formed. So we have to prevent that from happening. And this is the question that looks at that particular mechanism by which that cortical reaction occurs. C is the correct answer. I'd have to look at the goal sheet, but I think it's possible you don't have to know this either. I just thought this was, if we had extra time, it would be interesting to get to this. And we didn't, which is fine as well. You do need to know the roles of the placenta, I believe. So the placenta has 2 jobs. One is the one everyone knows, that it is the site of exchange of nutrients and wastes. And its other job is C, making hormones. It makes a tremendously important hormone, human chorionic gonadotropin, or HCG. That's the hormone that pregnancy tests detect. And it makes that hormone very early in the pregnancy and rescues the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum dies after 14 days, and it actually tells the corpus luteum to keep on keeping on for another few weeks until the placenta itself can begin to manufacture estrogen and progesterone to maintain the pregnancy. Again, remember, if at any time progesterone drops, the pregnancy is over, because menstruation will occur, and that includes shedding everything that's in the uterine lining, including an embryo that may be present there. All right, this is just a kind of picture of what's happening with the placenta from your book. And that figure that you've seen many times, which I was just referring to as we led up to this final section, which is about labor and delivery. The correct answer here is D, oxytocin. The trade name of the common form of the drug is Pitocin, which you may have heard of and you may not. And then this is the positive feedback loop that, again, I think you do need to know something about this, that triggers parturition or birth. Positive feedback loops, you might have noticed, a big deal in the reproductive system, and that's because the reproductive system isn't about homeostasis or keeping things the same. It's about making big changes, releasing the egg from the ovary, pushing the baby out of the body. So you need to have these big changes. So positive feedback loops are a good way to do that. So the fetus actually stretches the cervix, which causes oxytocin to be released from the posterior pituitary. The oxytocin triggers prostaglandins to be made by the uterus, which trigger uterine contractions. Contractions cause more stretch, which causes more oxytocin, and so on. And this sort of two-sided loop here continues until the baby is born. And then, of course, the cervical stretch is very small at that point, and that basically cancels the rest of this because the uterus collapses, although it's still quite large for several weeks after pregnancy, but it's not full. it's collapsed and empty at that point. Okay, I'm going to stop now and just let me know if you have questions about any of these, and I'll be happy to talk about it with you. Take care.